Gong hei fat choi. It's coming up to Chinese New Year. It's Wok Wednesdays. I'm Jeremy from School of Wok, and this week I'm doing a lobster noodle dish. And where noodles around this time of year, especially if they're nice and long, signify long life. Here's how you do it. The first thing I'm going to do is deal with the lobster, just so that he's not sitting there for too long. And actually the most sustainable way of doing this is going straight through the cross on the head, not boiling it, much like crab. So a sharp knife, and then straight down and in. And that has killed the lobster immediately. The next thing is just to clean anything from the inside. It will move, but the deed has already been done. So just pop a bamboo skewer or chopstick through and just let it drain like so. Once that's done, then you just want to start to twist off its claws. And from here, it's quite simple. Sharp knife, just to open up the meat in the tail from the head. You don't want to lose too much meat, so just pull that backwards. And then the traditional Chinese way is to cook it with its shell on. So you want to slice through like so. That's quite a big piece there, so I'm going to cut that. And this leaves the lobster really nice and fresh, as opposed to boiling it first and then re-cooking it, which is more the French way of cooking a lobster. Don't waste the head. The head's got a lot of flavour as well. You can either keep it whole, or if you are going to cut in half, then go lengthways. And just open it up. Now we keep it in its shell because it keeps the meat nice and succulent, but also the shell has a lot of savoury flavour in itself. The claws, straight through, and then give the claws a bash so that it's easier to crack open when you're eating it. So the lobster's been prepared, and now you just want to give it a quick rinse over in the sink, just under some cold water, and then we can get on with the noodles. Ginger and spring onion lobster is a classic Cantonese dish, and if you haven't been to Hong Kong, there's seafood restaurants by the coast where you can pick your fresh seafood either off the boats or from tanks that do amazingly fresh seafood. And what you want is just large chunks of spring onion. It's one of the parts of this dish that is really Moorish, is when you've got that seared ginger and spring onion sort of melting into the sauce. These spring onion and ginger are going to go into the wok at the same time. Just pop them into the same bowl. Want a good amount of ginger. Just slices is fine. Ginger and spring onion, ready. The noodles, just egg noodles, been soaked in hot water for about 4 minutes, something like that, and then dried on a clean tea towel. So just draining through, dry them. The drier the better, because I'm going to sear those in the wok just before I start cooking up the sauce. The lobster itself, just going to coat lightly in a bit of corn flour. I don't want like a thick or crispy batter. I just want a slight creaminess around the pieces of lobster. So a couple of spoons of corn flour should do the job. And then just season that with some salt and pepper. And just run your spoon through it. And that'll just coat gently around the pieces of lobster. So when I make the sauce, which I'm going to actually make with a base of your ginger, spring onion, some oyster sauce, a little bit of dark soy sauce, and some beer. Any sort of good liquid, either stock or beer or a bit of wine, works really well with this dish. It will just sort of sip into that sauce and make a nice smooth glaze around the lobster. So again, really, really traditional cooking this. So I'm going to double cook this, i.e. I'm going to start with deep frying the lobster, take it out, and then finish off the stir fry. Now you may have seen a few of our videos before, but if you haven't, then just to make sure the oil is hot enough, I use anything wooden. So wooden chopsticks are great for this. And as soon as you pop them in, if they're fizz up like that, then you know that you're at about 180 degrees C. So your lobster pieces can go straight in. Get the thicker pieces in first. Just stand back as it's spitting at you. At the beginning, some of that liquid might come out. It doesn't need too long. Give it 1 to 2 minutes of an instant sear. And you can see I've just cooked the claw part first. The rest of the lobster can go in last because it literally will take about 30 seconds to a minute to seal these pieces of meat. The lobster head I'm not going to waste, but I'll cook that into the actual sauce. Now the lobster's had its initial sear, everything else happens pretty quickly from here. I'm going to try and use the same wok without having to clean it. So I'm going to warm up my noodles first with just a little splash of dark soy sauce and a quick sort of almost Hong Kong style noodle base. And then I'm going to make the lobster sauce. High heat, use the oil from the deep frying of the lobster. It's got flavour in it now. Not too much, just a little oil. Make sure it's smoking hot. And then make sure you get a load of those long strands of noodles in. Give it a good tummy in the head, round and round, back and forwards, round and round, back and forwards with your wok and your spoon. And then back on the heat. Dark soy sauce wise, a very little bit, just enough to colour. And then round and round and back and forwards and tummy in the head once again. Just a light colouring of those noodles. A little bit of sesame oil over the noodles as well. So those noodles have heated up nicely. Just use that as my base. Straight back onto the wok, about a tablespoon of oil. Now you want to make sure that oil is smoking hot. And then we're going to get your pieces of ginger in first. As I said at the beginning, the seasoning of this really comes from the oyster sauce, but more importantly, the shell from the lobster. And this base sort of flavouring of oil. So you want to cook that ginger up nicely so it starts to brown. And then you can see the heat really building up in the wok here. Spring onion in. Flick that through. And then your sauces are going to come in a second. First thing I'm going to do is going to add my lobster head, just so it guards the sauce from burning. Right, oyster sauce is going in. I will flick that through into the wok in a second. The head takes a little bit longer than everything else, which has already had a pre-cook. And that flavour is going to start lifting off the shell as soon as I put the liquid in. My liquid comes from the beer. And beer works really well with this because you've got sort of bitter sweetness from the ginger that just sort of lifts off the bottom of the wok. You want enough beer in there to come to a real good boil, and then sort of half cover the lobster once it's all in. Get all that oyster sauce into there now. If you want to bring it to a boil quicker, cover it with a lid. So, after a couple of minutes, that's nice and vigorous, really on the boil. The sauce won't have really thickened up yet because all the corn flour is in the actual lobster meat. So lobster meat goes in. Carefully fold that into the sauce. And then once all the claws and meat are in the sauce and sitting nicely, cover it again. Give it about 3 minutes and then it'll pretty much be ready. The sauce is starting to thicken up nicely now. The lobster's head is definitely cooked. You can see from the colour change. So just take the heads straight out. And then give the rest a good fold around. Start to dish up the pieces of lobster first. It's definitely a celebratory dish, this. Not something we eat that often, but once a year over Chinese New Year, got a big gathering, everyone wows at it at the same time. Just going to finish this sauce off. It's slightly too thick for my liking, so I'm going to bring it to another boil and add a little bit more beer. I'm going to boil that alcohol off and then just change the colour slightly with a dash of dark soy. Just makes it that much more appealing. See, some of the brown meat from the head's gone into the sauce, which will make it really savoury in flavour. Once that's vigorously boiling, then pour it straight over the top. Really fresh, nice and sweet, but that bittersweet from the beer and the ginger works. And my favourite part, as I said, is the spring onion, along with the noodles. Chinese New Year dishes all have different types of significance, whether it's a whole fish for an abundance in life, long noodles for long life, wontons and dumplings folded into little gold ingot shapes for good wealth. If you like this type of culture and you really want to learn more about Asian cuisine in general, don't forget, guys, to subscribe to our channel, and happy Chinese New Year.